today's video, we'll be looking at scary true crime TikToks that will keep you scared all night.
This story keeps me up at night, and it's a real one. So in the early 90s, a woman named Jerry went to a psychotherapist named John Mack because she was having recurring nightmares of UFOs. Then one night, her 2-year-old son started screaming in terror in his room. She ran in to check on him, and he claimed that owl monsters were touching his legs. And when she asked where the owl monsters were now, he claimed that they were in a boat in the sky. So Jerry starts thinking that maybe her family is being visited by aliens. She kind of brushed it off at first, but then one night her daughter has this experience. She was practicing reading for school and she had to time herself in 10-minute intervals and see how far she could read. So she's timing herself for 10 minutes, marking how far she read. Timing herself for 10 minutes, marking. Timing herself for 10 minutes, and then she looks up and an hour has gone by. There's 50 minutes of time she can't account for, which apparently is kind of common in people who have been visited by aliens. I talk more about this story and other alien encounters on my podcast this week. And we hear a story from someone whose grandfather was visited by aliens in the 60s.
I mean, that's pretty interesting, you know.
Whatever you do, do not feel sorry for this woman. This woman's name is Yoselin Ortega, and she was a nanny. She had been working for her current employer for 2 years and she was not very happy. So she planned something that most of us can't even imagine. She was babysitting these 2 kids aged 2 and 6, and because she was so angry at their mother, she ended both their lives. And after she did, she put both their lifeless bodies into a bathtub and waited for the mother to come back home. And of course, when she did, the mother was absolutely floored and shocked as to what had happened. The nanny tried to kill herself by stabbing herself in the neck. You can actually see the wound right there, but she survived her injuries. During court, she said the reason she did what she did is because she wanted to see the mother's reaction to her slain kids. The mother, Marina Krim, had very little to say on that day because obviously she was so upset, and the nanny was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
What? All because you just want to see the reaction, though?
Since we're all talking about the
Some
World
sick
Cup, let's talk about how this soccer player was murdered after he lost the game. On June 22nd, 1994, Andres Escobar, who was the captain of Colombia's soccer team, was playing against the US and scored in his own net during the World Cup. Colombia ended up losing the game 2-1 and was eliminated. 10 days later, Andres was confronted by a group of men outside a club in the city of Medellin. These men began harassing Andres and making fun of him for shooting in his own net, and even though he tried to reason with them, they shot him 6 times. The next day, police arrested Humberto Castro Munoz, who was associated with powerful criminals and drug traffickers. It's been said that the criminals that Humberto was working with were betting a lot of money on Colombia to win, and when they lost because of Andres' mistake, then they ordered Humberto to murder him. Humberto was sentenced to 43 years in prison, but only served 11 years before being released for good behavior. More than 120,000 people attended Andres' funeral, and Colombia created a statue of him in 2002.
Dang, that's crazy, man. You gotta watch out with them sports bets,
Born
especially like
addicted to
FanDuel.
crack cocaine, little Elisa Escobar didn't stand a chance with a mother like hers. Elisa was born in 1989 in Brooklyn, New York, to parents Awilda Lopez and Gustavo Izquierdo. Throughout her pregnancy with Elisa, Awilda was abusing crack cocaine, meaning when Elisa was born, she actually had to be weaned off the drugs as she was addicted.
She's a crack baby.
Gustavo ended his relationship with Awilda when he realised what she was doing, and he vowed to get custody of Elisa. She actually had 2 children from a previous relationship that she'd lost custody of due to her drug abuse, and they were being raised by family members. When Elisa was born, Gustavo actually managed to win custody, and his world revolved around his daughter. He started taking parenting classes and he enrolled Elisa in a preschool in 1990. Unfortunately, his health started to decline and he could no longer afford the tuition fees, but she was a promising student, and the principal of the school decided to introduce her to one of the patrons of the school. This was Prince Michael of Greece, and he actually offered to pay for Elisa's tuition fees right up until 12th grade. During her first year of preschool, it came to Gustavo's attention that Awilda had actually beaten her addiction, secured permanent accommodation, got married and become pregnant with her 4th child. She'd also regained custody of her 2 older children. When Elisa was just 2, Awilda applied for visitation rights, and she won, meaning that Elisa would go and stay with her unsupervised every other weekend. Shortly after these visits started, Gustavo and also teachers at Elisa's school started to notice bruises. She also began bedwetting and started having regular nightmares. She also told her father at one point that her mother had beaten her and locked her in a closet. Gustavo tried to get Awilda's visitation rights revoked, but it was denied, saying that as long as she didn't beat her daughter, the visitation could continue. In 1993, Gustavo decided to come up with a plan to get Elisa away from her mother permanently. He was from Cuba and still had family there, so he decided to buy tickets for him and Elisa and take her where her mother couldn't hurt her anymore. The tickets were booked for May 26, 1994, but shortly before that, Gustavo started to experience breathing difficulties. He was admitted to hospital and diagnosed with lung cancer. He then sadly died on the exact day he planned to take Elisa to Cuba.
Ain't that
On
something?
hearing about Gustavo's death, Awilda decided to apply for full custody of her daughter. Due to the previous abuse of Elisa, there were multiple objections to the court from Gustavo's family and also Prince Michael of Greece. Despite that, Awilda was awarded full custody of Elisa.
On TikTok, you suppress the video, I don't even care no more. So Aubrey, the woman that was the cause of the Nashville school shooting, people are defending her because they don't like that people are using the wrong pronouns to identify them. Basically, Audrey was a woman transitioning to become a man. Because of this, some people are calling Audrey a woman, even though Audrey identified as a man now. So the community is upset at this, stated that no matter what heinous crime Audrey did, there's no reason to be calling them the wrong pronoun. I wish I could be making this up, but I promise you, in any video you see reporting this,
That's
they
crazy.
are saying this. Imagine defending a child murderer. You get no respect when you go on an active hunt to murder innocent children and people because you did not like a Christian school. Anybody defending this woman needs to be put in jail.
Yeah, that is crazy though, right? Like,
It's another rainy day in the South.
I ain't gonna
Got
speak
me
on it.
some sunshine today.
This woman is a prime example of how easily you can deceive people on your social media. This is Farron Jill Hudson, 35 years old, from Alabama. And the story starts in 2021 when her husband was arrested on 5 counts of possessing obscene material with a child under the age of 17. Later that year, he was rearrested for 76 counts of possession of child porn. Now, at the time, he claimed that police had
76,
planted these images on his phone, these videos, and there was an investigation undertaken. But when police investigated James's phone, they found evidence that linked his wife, Jill, to these crimes. Yes, Jill, the happy-go-lucky TikToker talking about God and sunshine. So after this new evidence came to light, new charges were added and Jill was arrested. And these new charges included incest, essay of a child, and production of obscene materials with a child under the age of 17. So during her interrogation, after she was arrested, Jill was shown a still image from one of these child porn videos that she allegedly helped to produce. And she confirmed to detectives and investigators that indeed it was her and another child in that video. Apparently, Jill confirmed that it was her in the video performing an obscene act with a child. But after she was arrested, Jill was stupid enough to call a family member, and on the phone call from jail, she asked her family member to go check her devices and destroy evidence. So obviously authorities were listening into that phone call. They were able to get search warrants for all of her other electronics, and they're undergoing a search of her property right now. It's just wild. You wouldn't imagine that that woman who posted that video would be accused of doing such horrific things with children. And it just goes to show that these predators are everywhere, so we have to stay vigilant and keep our children safe. That should be our #1 priority in this nation.
That's true, man. These kids got too much freedom. They be on these phones, on TikTok,
Part 3 on
on
what
all these
happened to
apps.
14-year-old Norma Lee
No
Beth and
control.
how she was killed after getting into a fight with her school bully. So yeah, according to this friend, even after her death, Norma continued to get bullied and taunted. The fact that classmates showed up to her funeral to make fun of her is wild. As for Asada,
At
the
her
one who
funeral?
killed Norma, she showed absolutely no sign of remorse. She never called the family to offer her condolences. She never took accountability for anything. In fact, after Norma died, she wasn't immediately arrested. It wasn't until the case started to go viral on social media that the investigators finally took the case seriously, fired the director of the school, and they immediately began searching for Asada. And on March 18th, 2023, Asada was finally arrested. Now, since she is only 14 years old, she was sent to this correctional facility in Mexico that's specifically for minors. The place is called the Quinta del Bosque Correctional Facility, and at this facility, you go to workshops, you go to classes, you go to therapy, you basically do activities to try to become a better person. The maximum sentence that you can have at this facility is 5 years. Unfair that Asada took someone's life. She literally killed Norma. She hit her on the head with a rock, and all she might get is just 5 years at a correctional facility. A facility where you go to therapy and you go to workshops and you do like group activities. It just doesn't seem fair to a lot of people. If she felt grown enough to taunt Norma, to bully her, to assault her, and to fight her, then she should be grown enough to be charged as an adult. The fact that she was acting all cocky and proud in front of Alma and told her, yeah, I beat up your sister, yeah, I broke her nose, just shows the kind of person that Asada truly is. She showed absolutely no remorse, and the family feels that this is not justice. The family is happy that the director of the school was fired, but they also feel like the professors and the other classmates need to face some consequences. The professors knew about the bullying, but they didn't do anything to protect Norma. The family also feels like all the classmates that stood there and watched this happen should be held accountable. They should either get suspended or be expelled from school because they took part in the bullying. It's so heartbreaking that Norma tried to get help, but she didn't receive it. It's really sad that the last few months of her life she was filled with so much sadness, with so much heartbreak, and with so much disappointment. She did not deserve this, and we need to do better. Something needs to change, and I hope that everyone that needs to be held accountable for Norma's death is held accountable. My thoughts and prayers go out to her family. I am so sorry that this happened to her, and it's just so heartbreaking because she was just a couple of weeks away from her 15th birthday. Her birthday is on April 25th, and she was so excited to be turning 15 years old. It's just so unfortunate that she never got to make it and that her life was taken from her. Hope that Norma truly gets justice.
Straight up, yo, that's messed up, man. Like, hey, school is scary, right? You send your kids to school, you don't know what's gonna happen, right? You know, she got into a fight, she didn't beat this girl to death, and then her sentence was basically a 5-year after school program. You know, go have some fun for 5 years. We're gonna lock you over here, and then we're gonna let you back out. See if you do it again. But man, feel sorry for her family, for real.
Teenager's reaction to getting a life sentence.
That there is only one appropriate sentence in this case. Mr. Fucci, if you and your attorneys would please rise. Counsel, is there any legal reason why this court cannot impose sentence at this time? Mr. Fucci, having entered a plea of guilty to the crime of first-degree murder, I adjudicate you guilty of the premeditated first-degree murder of Tristan Bailey. I sentence you to life in prison. Because of your age, you are eligible for review of the sentence in 25 years.
He was okay with it. Wait a minute, what was that?
Imagine growing up knowing that you were adopted, and 60 years later, when you take an ancestry DNA test, you find out that your birth mom was the victim of one of the most notorious cold cases in American history. Richard Hanchett was born in 1958 in Michigan, and he was immediately given up for adoption by his birth mother. In 2018, Richard, who still lived in Texas, decided to take an ancestry DNA test, and he was immediately matched with relatives from his birth mother's family. He connected with them and even went down to Tennessee to finally meet them. And that's when Richard learned that his birth mother, Ruth Marie Terry, had been missing since the early 70s. For decades, her family searched for her, but they were unable to find her, until 2022. In October of this year, the FBI and Massachusetts State Police announced that nearly 50 years later, they had finally identified the victim of the oldest unsolved homicide case in Massachusetts, the Lady of the Dunes. And the Lady of the Dunes was identified as Ruth Marie Terry. On July 26, 1974, a little girl was hiking with her family when she came across the body of a mutilated woman. Her hands were missing. Police believe this was an attempt to get rid of her fingerprints so they couldn't identify her, and her head was nearly severed. Detectives searched motels and rooming houses and even reviewed thousands of missing persons cases from Massachusetts. They also used clay models to recreate what the Lady of the Dunes might have looked like. Her case unfortunately went cold, and some even speculated that she was the victim of the South Boston gangster Whitey Bulger. In 2000, authorities had her body exhumed to extract DNA, but it wasn't until recently that they were able to use genealogy testing to identify her. This is the same technique that was used to identify the Golden State Killer. Now flash forward to November of this year, authorities announced that they had a new development in the investigation. They had now identified the Lady of the Dunes, now they had to identify who her killer was. Authorities revealed they were seeking information on a man who was already deceased. This man was known as Guy Rockwell Moldavan. Guy was an antique dealer and he was actually arrested in 1960 in connection to the disappearance of his former wife and her daughter. Remains believed to be theirs were found in their Seattle home. He only served a suspended sentence, so he actually got released in 1962. Now, court records indicate that Guy and Ruth actually got married in Reno, Nevada in February of 1974, just months before she was killed. Now that they have her identity, this case is being treated as a homicide investigation by the Massachusetts State Police and FBI. The public is actually being asked to review Terry's Seeking Information poster. This includes newly released photos and a little bit more information. This case is still ongoing.
Dark web footage that got leaked.
Look at that. Oh no. What's she doing with them clowns anyway?
What happened to 4-year-old Luz Gonzalez and how she was killed while her mom tied her shoes. The family is originally from Mexico, but at the time Luz lived in Brooklyn, New York with her mother Reina, and she was just honestly the cutest little 4-year-old girl. She was just absolutely adorable and just so nice and kind to everyone. On Sunday, June 24th, 2018, Luz and her mother were walking outside of this laundromat called the Clean City Laundromat in New York. They were walking along the sidewalk, but as you can see, this whole parking lot is just a mess. There is no division between the parking lot and the sidewalk, so if someone reverses from the laundromat, they literally have to drive over the sidewalk. It was just not a safe sidewalk, and Luz was riding her scooter up and down the sidewalk, having fun with her mother following closely behind. Now, as she's riding her scooter, her shoe actually falls off, so Luz gets off the scooter and she goes over to pick up her shoe. Luz tried to put the shoe on herself, but she was 4 years old at this time, so she was struggling to do so, and that's when her mother Reina decided to bend down and help her daughter. So Reina bent down to tie her daughter's shoe, and as you can see, they're still on the sidewalk. They're not in the parking lot, they're not in the middle of the road, like they're literally on the sidewalk, which is meant for pedestrians. But again, this parking lot and this sidewalk were built incorrectly, so in order for someone to back out or get inside the laundromat, they literally have to drive over the sidewalk. So as you can see, Luz and her mother are crouched down on the ground trying to put on her shoe when all of a sudden 38-year-old Jeanette Maria, who is driving this black SUV, starts to back out of the parking lot. Again, Luz and her mother are low on the ground. It's not like Reina is standing up and is super obvious, but at the same time when you're backing out, you should always be aware of your surroundings.
Right.
So Jeanette backs out of the parking lot, and as you can see, Luz and her mother were right in front of her. As she gets ready to peel out of the parking lot, she runs over 4-year-old Luz and her mother Reina. After she ran them over, Jeanette stopped because she obviously realized that she had hit something. So she stopped the car, she took a little bit of a pause, and then she just continued driving. She just drove off and she left Luz and Reina alone on the sidewalk. She didn't call the police, she didn't get out of her car to check, what she had hit, nothing. Which is just crazy because her car literally shook after running over 2 people. She obviously was aware that she had hit something, but she didn't care enough to get out and look at what had happened. Now people saw all of this go down, so they immediately ran over to Luz and her mother and tried to call for help. There's actually video footage of Reina just sitting on the ground hugging her daughter, and she just looks like she's in shock. Reina had a really bad injury to her leg, but the injuries to her daughter Luz were much more severe. Police were informed about what had happened, and they actually pulled over the driver, Jeanette Maria, about 4 blocks away from the laundromat. Police informed her that she had just ran over a 4-year-old girl and her mother, and Jeanette was in complete shock. She said she had no idea how this had happened and that she had no idea she had hit someone. She denies everything, and then the police just let her go. Okay, I'm running out of time. More in part 2.
They just let her go? I didn't do anything. I didn't hit nothing.
I am Nanny Doss. I was known as the giggling granny because I seemed harmless and sweet, but the truth is, I was a serial killer.
Hey, this is creepy. Hold on.
I was responsible for the deaths of 4 of my husbands, 2 of my children, my mother, my sister, and my 2 grandsons. I used various methods to kill them, such as poisoning them with arsenic, rat poison, or sometimes even boiling water. My first husband, Charlie Braggs, died after just a few months of marriage. I poisoned him with rat poison, as I had grown tired of his abusive behavior. I then went on to marry and kill 3 more husbands, Robert Harrelson, Richard L. Morton, and Samuel Doss. With each of these men, I used a different method of poisoning. In addition to my husbands, I also killed my 2 middle daughters, Melvina and Florine. I gave them a concoction of rat poison and crushed glass, claiming it was medicine to make them feel better.
Crushed glass?
They died in agony. I also killed my mother, Louisa, with arsenic, and my sister, Dovey, with rat poison. My crimes were finally uncovered after the suspicious death of my 5th husband, Samuel Doss. A doctor who had attended to one of my previous victims reported me to the authorities, and I was arrested in 1954. I confessed to all of my crimes and was sentenced to life in prison.
Yo, that was some creepy AI stuff. Like, I feel like I was really looking at this person. Those are some scary, true, and sad crime TikToks, man. I ain't gonna lie, man. Some of those things is kind of sad. Yeah, if you guys like the content, don't forget to subscribe, turn your notification bell on, and until next time, YouTube, peace.